Te Wero2017, inspiring Māori leadership in education.
He manu kai te miro, no nā te ngahere. He manu kai te mātauranga, no nā te ao. He manu kai te miro, no nā te ngahere. He manu kai te mātauranga, no nā te ao. Whawhia te kete,
te mātauranga.
whawhia te kete,
Te mātauranga. Ko tahi te hiringa, ko te hiringa I te mahara.
ko tahi te hiringa, ko te hiringa I te mahara. Ko tahi te hiringa, ko te hiringa I te mahara. Whawhia tō kete,
I te mātauranga.
whawhia tō kete,
I te mātauranga.
whawhia tō kete. We're advertising for a new guitarist, Kia ora everyone, my name is Diana.
And my name is Mark. Sometimes I introduce myself as Waingata.
True story. So, as you know, urban Māori, born and raised in Purirua under the umbrella of Ngāti Toa, but proud Ngāti Porou.
And of course, many of you will know, especially Victor, that I was born and raised in Mangatuna, just north of Uau.
Some people will actually, independently, we do a lot of different things and we're pretty good at them, but when we're together, we are known to be of different characteristics. Like, he's known to be the doer.
And she's the thinker.
Apparently, I have sharp edges.
And I'm smooth.
I have this vision.
Forward.
Forward.
And of course, I'm dwelling in the past.
And together right now, we stand at the gate of Te Kuwatawata. And I have to say, being a consultant psychiatrist and the head of department of psychiatry in the Tairawhiti, there's a huge problem. It's disgusting. This is what we're going to talk about, but I digress sometimes.
We go with the waiter.
And when you trust in the wairua, everything works out fine. That magnificent picture is from Mark's brilliant hands, Te Kuwatawata.
Now, I am Te Kuwatawata. I'm a god, and you all know that. And I dwell at a place called Poutererang, on the pathway to a lovely, peaceful haven called Rarohenga. I sit at the gate, and I govern what goes through and what comes out.
And in the past, people could access the spirit world. They could come and go until something happened.
Until something went wrong, and the system that they were using didn't work. And so Te Kuwatawata recalibrated that system to what we have today.
So I think on the 31st of August, we started a new service piloted by the Ministry of Health to work with whānau in distress in the Tairawhiti. You'll notice I didn't say who met the criteria of the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that had major depressive illness or schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, people in distress. And that's not out there somewhere, that's us.
And the other beautiful thing about this space that we have, as a Māori artist, is that it's also Gisborne or the Tairawhiti's newest Māori art gallery. Because we didn't want to have people who come in just suffering from distress as if they're walking into a WINS office or if they're walking into some clinical setting that made them feel uncomfortable. We wanted to make them feel comfortable and welcome.
So here's where I give my big blurb. When you look at mental health problems, they're significant internationally. We have a shortage of psychiatrists, we have a shortage of health professionals, and we, Indigenous peoples around the world, have the highest statistics in depression, anxiety disorders, psychotic disorders, suicide, domestic violence, all those things that are actually a consequence of colonisation and racism. And you might think that if we had more people, or if we had more resources, or if we had more psychiatrists, we could get this right. But actually, my belief, and the belief of us who are in Te Kuwatawata, I hope we've employed the right people, we actually believe that the ideology has been from one paradigm and one paradigm only. And although the ministry will write in their reports that culture matters, and they'll employ cultural therapists or kaumātua, it's secondary. Central to this system in mental health is a paradigm of psychiatry. So I'm just going to break that down. The age of reasoning, the age of enlightenment, was a time where we looked into ourselves and pulled out these entities called experiences. And we thought, oh, we have an experience. Oh, you have an experience too. Let's name that experience and call it a symptom. And let's put all of our experiences together in a group and call them a syndrome. And if we cluster that together, we have a diagnosis. And if we have a diagnosis, then we need to make sure, me here in the Tairawhiti as a psychiatrist, someone who diagnoses, is saying the same thing as someone in Auckland, in Rarotonga, in Aitutaki, in Paris. We all speak the same language, understanding these experiences, but quite wrongly, we have quite different experiences. And the mind is more than just an organ that has a whole lot of cellular connections. The mind is something that finds meaning in everything that you relate to. The person you're in love with, the environment you live in, our mind works to find that connection. But two of the biggest flaws in the age of reasoning was that we said that there are chemical imbalances, and that's what causes this experience when we're distressed. And if you think of that in a medical term, that there are chemical imbalances, then actually you'll be looking for a chemical solution. And if you are more holistic and want to look way beyond medication, then they've got that corner covered too with psychotherapies. And if you engage in psychotherapy, like I know many of us are, then what we're saying is there's something innately wrong with the way you think. And so it makes sense that those people most impacted by those flaws in that ideology are Indigenous people. So I come back to the idea that we were colonised, and as we were colonised, we had different institutions in place to make sure the superior being, white, superior being, white as in over the line, I'm human, versus brown or darker than and non-human. We're setting up systems such as health systems, education systems, justice systems, churches, to redefine what was meaningful, to redefine your experience when you grieved. Now, I don't have to tell you in this room, we have an amazing grieving process as Māori. That is something that is taken away from us as Indigenous people when you have a whānau, and we'll call them students. Actually, I can tell you now that a lot of the people I work with are teachers, mums, dads. They're normal people in an abnormal, unjust environment. And they come and see me, and this ideology takes over. So whether it be you or your student or your whānau member, they are invited into a single knowledge system with those flawed ideologies. And all they've done is disempower us. We have lost our imagination, our creative element, that ability to find our own solutions from within. If you take anything away from our kōrero today, it will be to change a society. There are 3 ngangara that you need to be aware of, and you've mentioned them. The first keynote mentioned them, individuality. You must address it at a collective level. Meritocracy. Merit is it's a political philosophy that says that we will define which skill, which ability has the right to heal someone who's distressed. So no more going to nanny, no more going to your tohunga. You come to camps, you come to community mental health. We are the experts, we know what you need. And the third is when we address the secret histories that shape who we are. And you know, as teachers, that we don't teach our communities our histories. And yet if they shape who we are and where we've come from, why are we not looking back to them to find the solutions to working through our distress? Ka pai, 3 points. You'll see, you would have read, hopefully. Some people can't multitask, but what we're saying is if you follow my system, you will have longer waiting times, you will be pathologised. If you're someone who's normal, who's been raped, of course you're going to go haywire. Of course it's going to affect your family. Of course it is. But does that mean you need to be pathologised? Did we not have other ways other than medication to find solutions?
So some of those other ways I'm going to share with us here. When I shifted down to Pōneke, down to Titei Bay, I set up a studio, a moko studio down there, and sometimes Diana would come back from her work and she would sit filling out notes and so forth in the waiting area of my studio. And while she was there, one of the nieces walked in, which gives you, whittles it down that the niece was from this area. But this niece walked in and said to me, just like almost carelessly, said, "Uncle, I'm hearing voices again." And I said to her, "That's all right, sweetie. I talk to the dead on a regular basis." And she was sort of like, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, we always, Uncle Wayne, Uncle Victor, Uncle Derek, Uncle Mark. We get up on the marae, and one of the first things that we acknowledge and talk to are our dead." And so that's the difference between this pathologizing and just accepting that that's part of our culture, that's the way we are. And another thing about people coming to see us is that also in the same studio, Dinah walked in and there were it might be a little bit uncomfortable because there were people that were in there that she had treated. But those people had decided, I'm going to go this way to try and find a way out of my dilemma, out of my darkness. And so they would come and see my Kopua, who would then sit there, ask them to share their story with me, and they would share the story, and then I would turn it into something with more meaning, or with some meaning, and then offer them the opportunity to put that meaning on a permanent basis on their skin, or in their skin. And so that was me discovering at that particular time. I didn't realize all this. I was just thinking I was being the most fantastic artist I could possibly be. But I didn't realize that I was actually part of those people's healing journey. Now, when I look back on it, I thought, oh my goodness, I've done so many people who come in with these so many different issues that have caused them grief throughout their existence. And so I realized, gee, I wonder how many of my other colleagues are doing this type of work. And so I did a little bit of research and discovered that everyone that I contacted had been dealing with the same issues as well, the same as me. So then, for some reason, and I won't name who that reason was, but then I got involved with mental health. And I became the good old cultural therapist at a Māori mental health service down in Porirua. And it was really, really uncomfortable because I'm an artist. And I thought, what the hell am I doing in this space? You know, it was different, I went into that space as opposed to people needing my assistance coming into my space. So I went into that space and I discovered, it took me a few days to discover that an MDT, because there's those acronyms that Hekia was talking about, was a multidisciplinary team meeting. And they have them every week, and gathered in this room are all the staff of various levels. So you have child and adolescent, and then you have adult and community mental health. And I noticed sitting there, and it was still very uncomfortable, that the position of power in that meeting sat with the psychiatrist and the psychologist. So that's that system, that one point of view was the psychiatric point of view. And the voices of the other staff sitting in this team meeting were quite muffled, like mine was. I was muffled because I was befuddled. What the hell am I doing here? Discombobulated. Even that word discombobulates me. And so I got coerced, and I'm not going to name who she is that coerced me, to actually put my voice in the room. So when I decided and got rid of discombobulation, and plucked up the courage to ask a question, I sat in this room and I said, I have something to ask. And they said, yes, what was that? This is the doctor leading the show. And I said, I'd like to know what the whakapapa of this boy is, because I think I know his grandparents. And what that did, it was a bit of a challenge, a wero to me. But what it did was that it shifted the paradigm, and suddenly the doctor and the psychologist were muffled, and the social worker and the nurse and the cultural therapist and everybody else sitting in that MDT meeting suddenly had a voice. And it was good to see that suddenly our cultural perspective had become the voice in the room to help this young boy in whatever issues or stress that he was experiencing. So that allowed me to then put my hand up all the time, so I got something to ask. What's the whakapapa for this boy? And it was amazing the transformation that happened there. You just have to push yourself into that space and ask those questions.
So te kūwatawata, the front door and the tairāwhiti for whānau in distress, what we want to do is not actually kill off psychiatry. So for all of you that are seeing a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist and are on medication, you know, stay well, stay well, because I'm running out of psychiatrists and there's not enough of us. But we don't want to push it out, but we want to make it secondary. And we want those 4 areas to be central. So we want, when you're in distress, for you to come in with your whānau And so if you had a student and you were worried about them and you referred them to te ku watawata, we would be wanting to know if you can sit with them too. Because many voices in a room provides many ideas to think about many different solutions. And I liken it to the pūkaya, having a multiphonic sound, many different sounds coming together to vibrate, to resonate, to finally reach a point where you will go, aha, I know what I need. Not for me to tell you what you need. Although I will bring my art and my skill in, it's just one of many voices. And so if you can imagine values and relationships and meaning, when you hear voices, we want to find the meaning behind that experience. That's what we're after.
And one of the other things that we want to do in terms of changing the way that we assist people who are struggling with stress is to drag our culture into that room. So that our people, and I just learned yesterday from a person who had been working in mental health for quite some time, that 40 years ago, this is just in Carrington, the example, there were only 5 patients who were Māori in the Carrington Hospital mental health unit. Now it's up close to 99%. That's what she shared yesterday. And it's actually mirrored all around the country. And it doesn't miss us out. We're not that tapu that we don't get missed out on that stuff. All right. So those are some of the things that we're battling with, and part of that is that if we are the people who are populating those spaces, then we need to bring our culture into those spaces.
And so the way we did that is that we came back to the coast and we knew that the system was sick. We knew that the system was sick. And we brought back mahi atua. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And we decided that what we needed to do was build a critical mass in the community. Put your hands up if you're in the room and you're a mataora. So we meet here every Wednesday morning and we wānanga. And you know those muffled voices that you heard Mark talk about? You know, as a Māori, when you're at the decision-making table and you feel unheard, and so you just give up and you internalise and get angry and frustrated and put knives in people's backs and things like that because you can't find a way of getting past that white privilege that our first keynote speaker talked about. How do you address racism? Well, first of all, you have to say the word. You have to know what it feels like. You have to be able to know how to respond to someone when they do things to shut you down when you have a great idea. So we decided we would start this wānanga. We called it Te Kurahuna, which means...
Oh, the hidden gems, the X factor.
And we agree that collectively we have the answers. And it doesn't matter whether you're a white Māori, an urban Māori, someone who's on the journey to learning te reo, or someone raised in it in Matatau. But together we can do this. And so we got together 2 hours every Wednesday. And now we are up to 70 people. They come and they go, but it's a bit of a tapu group. You have to be selected to come in. And we share our creation stories and our whakapapa. We share our tipuna stories. We share our own stories. And we are absolutely in love with being here. Many of us who work on behalf of Māori feel quite isolated in a very racist system. And so to come here on Wednesday and not bitch and moan, but rather learn and grow, it's amazing. And so that's what we did. And we had 3 principles that we followed. So our 3 principles are to indigenise the space you occupy. So we have teachers from Te Karaka, we have teachers from Waikirikiri, we have mental health clinicians, we have GPs, we have artists, we have many people from the community who come in and then they wānanga and go back out to the spaces they occupy, and they stay strong in the second principle, which is to stay an active learner. It is our successes that are our failures. We are so good at what we do, and Hekia talked about it. It's very similar in mental health, that there's research that's done that showed that we think individually, I think that I'm 80% better than all of you. So if you have a whānau and they fell apart, it's because they weren't with me. That's where we're at. And so we agree that there's racism, but when it comes closer to home, we say, no, not here. So it's out there somewhere, not in here. And so we want to stay active learning. And so the third principle is to embrace negative feedback. We are a society that's so PC. And if you have a Māori at a decision-making table, we become loyal to those parties around the table, not to the kaupapa that you were meant to represent. So go home and ask your family, ask your kids, how good am I being as a mum? And I know lots of mums feel so guilty, but I have to say, don't just ask when you've just given them $50 to go out and buy some fish and chips. Ask after you've growled them. And listen. Don't listen for what's wrong with what they say. Just listen to what they say. And so we're practicing that. So in this wānanga, we do the story, the separation of rangi and papa, and all these other stories, the turning of Ruaumoko, the story of Mataora, and we do whakaari, we look absolutely ridiculous, and then we ask Juan, give us some negative feedback about that, and we feel uncomfortable telling you that that sucked. And so we have our youth there, we have our children there, and we're starting to think about wānanga in a different way. And actually, at Ngāurea Māui, they've realised, shit, we're following a Pākehā structure and speaking Māori. And they're thinking, how do we get our whānau internally motivated to study for the exams? And they've thought about wānanga. It's not rocket science, but being together allows us to think differently.
I don't think they've had a discussion broader than their own group for that. Yeah, you could be getting them in trouble.
No. Anyway, so in our wānanga on Wednesdays, te kurahuna is absolutely pivotal to te kūwatuata, because it's not about going away to training to learn how to be an expert. It's about being together with your community. That really common term we talk about, whanaungatanga, that's what it's about. It's like Jean telling me that she's the senior manager for the Year 9 Plus project and thinking, I didn't know that. We should hook up and do something together, collectively. Not wait for an individual to be referred into CAMS, to be diagnosed as ADHD, oppositional defiance, conduct disorder, and be told that you have to be sent away to a rehab. We don't need to wait that long. So we grow change agents in our wānanga. Our change agents are called Mataora. Aroha mai if you don't know the story of Mataora, but please do go away and learn about it. He was a bit of a bad, arrogant bugger, and then he changed his ways. Not because it was his responsibility and it's up to you to change, but he went to an environment that had that change. Our community has to work toward that change. Individuals cannot change without us all acknowledging our own failures and always looking to performance enhance. If you wanted to be an Olympic champion, you wouldn't want positive feedback from your coach. You want to know what style you're using that's wrong to cut a second off your time. Why aren't we doing that? So we are Mataora, and we specialise in mahi atua, which is sharing those pūrākau in a wānanga when whānau come in distress. Now remember, and I saw a father yesterday and I said, okay, so we routinely ask for feedback about the session. And we'd done Tanya in the 3 baskets, and I said, okay, what did you think of that approach, 0 to 10? He goes, 0. So I don't want us thinking that our way is the way, because that would be the same as that single knowledge system. Everyone has their own understanding about how to get to where they want to get to. It's our job to be always getting routine, deliberate feedback about what we could do better next time. Ka pai?
So one of the things that we've done is that when we started our wānanga, we brought in artists, because often artists have this right on the perimeter way of thinking about certain issues. And often those artists who would sit on the perimeter and view things differently have a tendency to break beyond that perimeter. So we wanted artists that could sit in the room and listen to people who are bringing their stress and their distress to the room, and be able to interpret that from another perspective, as opposed to being from a person who's assigned there to assess the illness. So the artists come into the room. That's what I did when I first started getting involved in mental health. I just went into the room and drew what I heard, and then gifted that drawing to the person who shared that life story with me. So we bring artists into the wānanga, and we now at Te Ku'uwatawata have employed artists as mataora to sit in sessions with a lot of our people who are in distress to share their talents. And often, I don't know, most of us will remember that, when people used to get very ill and then suddenly they came back and they were weaving experts, because weaving was offered as a therapy for them. So we're kind of bringing that back into the way we treat some of our people who are in distress. So we bring the artists back in, but not only that, but we bring by bringing artists into the mix, you bring people who have been carrying around history and whakapapa as artists to those tipuna that they have created in their art, that can share that kōrero with those people, that can connect those people up, because that's a lot of the raru that comes into the room, is that our people are disconnected. And so artists come in there to help connect them to one another, connect them to their history, to their tipunas. And so that's what we've done. We've employed artists. It's risky. Our artists are crapping themselves, actually. But they're brave. They've taken up that challenge. They've sat in the wānanga over quite a few months. And when Te Ku'uwatawata was launched and they became part of that team, they are now getting slowly used to that environment, which, again, like I say, is like a Māori art gallery, so the artists will feel very at home in that space. And I tell you right now, just in the experience, we've only been open for less than 2 weeks. And already we're having people who are coming in there just to sit in the space, because the space is very tau. The wairua in there is very, very tau. And so it's a marvellous space. I invite you to come along just to even sit, have a chat with us, have a kōrero, watch what's going on, be a part of it. Bring your creativity into that space.
So those three things that I talked about that get in the way of a society being able to change, the wānanga for us was a way of addressing individuality. So there was a time when Manutuke School had 7 young children who self-harmed. And rather than bringing them into the system, we took a group of mataora out there. We took them to them and shared the stories. They were already a kura that embraced story, and they understood those stories. And they were able to think about those stories in the context of problem solving, of thinking about the distress, the whakapapa of distress. You know, the whakapapa of injustice coming all the way down from Ruaumoko, the whakapapa of tears and crying and grief from Uru, the whakapapa of guilt and jealousy and fear and enragement from our atua whiro, being able to share those so that you're not alone and that it connects you up to who you are. We already know if you're in distress, if you have low self-esteem, all those things, those mental health issues, that if you know where you come from, if you have strong identity, then you're more likely to get through that distress. But I have to say, even though you do have a strong identity, the system, there's some dissonance. It's just not connected to your way of understanding. So that's the first one, is the collective approach. Sometimes we're in the same space and everyone, if you know there's a whole group of you who are following the same principles, it makes you feel braver. The second one is about meritocracy. Our artist, Toi Haukura, is renowned internationally of breeding absolute fantastic artists. It's really sad when you see them working in Bunnings. And I love the fact that Te Ku Watawata is an art-health collaboration. And the third one is addressing a history, addressing secret histories by bringing those histories back into the room when you're distressed. We need to make an opportunity out of a crisis. We need to build you to be able to feel confident and capable to hold that crisis. We'll sit with you, but no more of that just dumping. Be with us, because we don't have the capability to work individually. So if you want to use Te Ku Watawata, get to know it, feel part of it, be with us. Use mahi atua in your school, because if you take that individual into Te Ku Watawata and then they go back to school and you're not sharing the same language that we're using in our wānanga, then momo wā. So I just have to say that so that's Waikirikiri School, I think. So we do Waikirikiri School.
Horauta.
That's Horauta wānanga. Whānau mā, Te Ku Watawata isn't the only answer, mahi atua isn't the only answer, but I have to say, be careful. Suicide prevention is a terminology used to build an empire. And if you talk about suicide prevention without understanding that context that I just gave, more money goes into specialists. And the more specialised you are, the greater the divide between community and help. Suicide is a consequence of racism, of colonisation, of poverty. Same with domestic violence, same with addictions. The opposite of all of those things is connection. Tēnā tātou.